Welcome back to another episode of Sound of the Loons podcast brought to you by Allina Health. I am your host, Zarek Valentine, and we are here with the one, the only Coach Ramsay. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's always strange to see you in this way, in this light. You do a good job.
Hopefully it's a good thing, but thank you for coming back on. You're one of our few repeat guests. So I know the fans are extremely excited to hear about you. We can look back on the first half of the season as we're about two-thirds of the way through, preview some things in the middle, and then, get forward and hopefully what would be, a bow on what might happen at the end of the season. But take us into a little bit of your thought process as this was, your first year coaching. Take us into some of the things you learned, some of the things that were difficult in MLS that were thought might be easier. But take us into your head a little bit about your first year coaching here at MNUFC.
Yeah, we obviously had a really good year. Ultimately, last year everyone was really pleased with the outcome where we got the group to, and ultimately everything that went with the finish aside from getting over the final hurdle against Galaxy. And I think when we look back at the 7 or 8 months that went before that, there were lots of ups and downs. There were lots of sort of trials and tribulations, pretty unique to MLS that I maybe wouldn't have anticipated coming in. So I feel like from my own personal perspective, it was a phenomenal first year coaching. It was everything that if I'd had a chance to script the first year, I'd have probably included, in the sense that I had a chance to experience some real success, had a chance to work with what felt like sort of 3 iterations of our group last year, had a chance to try and keep the ship steady over a very difficult summer last year, and felt like ultimately we sort of surpassed what was expected of us last year and set us up for what has been so far a really good year this year. So I think for me, to 18 months in, to have had a chance to go through all that in year one, and then take time over the course of the off season to really nail down where it was that we wanted the group to go, where it was that we felt we could improve as a set of players, but also a set of staff that wraps around that group, and ultimately where it was that we wanted to take the group in terms of it being its most competitive version. And I feel like we have got to a point 2/3 of the way into this season where we are very, very competitive in every game. We're a really difficult side to beat. I think we'll be probably the first name on a lot of other coaches' lips when it comes to the sides that are most awkward to play against, and that was what we set out to do this year. We really wanted to make sure that we absolutely squeezed the most out of everything that we've got here, and we became a team that found every advantage at its disposal. And I've really enjoyed that side of not just this season, but that element of being here over the course of 18 months. I think it's really developed me as a coach, but it's also been hopefully a really enjoyable thing to be a part of for me and everyone else, because ultimately come game day at the moment, we feel like we can go out and beat anyone, and you get that sense of real energy from the group every day, and you really feel like we are building towards something very purposeful.
Yeah, I think everyone enjoys coming to work, and that's a sign of the culture that's been built, obviously, when Khaled's come in and brought yourself, and Cam carried that torch at first, that it makes work enjoyable. Obviously, results always help. But when you spoke about some of the trials and tribulations in terms of coming to MLS, typically that's come with travel and the schedule, playing through international breaks, some of the weather, because the weather in Minnesota is a lot different than the weather in Houston. Take us into some of those things that you had anticipated being challenges coming here, and things that maybe were harder, maybe things might have been easier, because having played in Minnesota, having played in Portland, having played in Houston, having played in Norway, I kind of have felt it firsthand. So take us into some of the I guess, stereotypical things that you might see from England or abroad, and then now living it, what was that like for the first time?
I think that was part of what attracted me to coming here, because it felt like it was such a unique opportunity to really test yourself in, I think, a set of circumstances that constitute this league that are like no other when you think of the scale of the country and some of those extremes when it comes to weather and the length of the season and travel. And I felt like for someone in my position to have a chance to try and piece all those things together in a way that was coherent and ultimately with the aim of producing, come game day, a really competitive team. I felt like that was almost the perfect start for someone in my position who'd had my experiences up until that point. And I knew the headlines about MLS, I knew what went with it in that sense, but I think until you've really felt it, and I think until you've maybe suffered in the way that we suffered last June when we had that perfect storm of everything that you've mentioned, plus playing through an international tournament that really sapped at us, and having a small squad and everything that went with that. I think that was quite literally a perfect storm. And I think what's been nice from my perspective to an extent is when the British teams have come over for pre-season this year, or certainly the sides that have played in the Club World Cup, they've really experienced the difficulties and the volatility of life playing this sport in the US, and I feel like people back home will probably have far more sort of empathy and understanding for some of the difficulties, particularly over the summer months. And I think this time around it's credit to everybody who's been involved with this group, right from the support staff wrapped around the group to the players to the coaching staff, in terms of how this period has been handled, because we set out with an objective to make sure that what happened last year does not happen this year. And obviously we were better equipped from the perspective of how the playing squad looked, and it wasn't quite such an extreme set of circumstances. But what we've done over these months is keep our heads well above water, stay in touch with the top of the table, not find ourselves in a position where we've lost back-to-back games. And I think it takes a lot in MLS. It takes there's a lot of ingredients that goes into that. And I think the fact that we've hit the end of July and we're now approaching the Leagues Cup in a really stable position, not having suffered a huge dip, is credit to everyone involved.
Yeah, and I think something I've preached is the we is greater than me. And I think that our club, from the players to the staff to everyone upstairs, really embraces their role. And though we all provide different pieces to the puzzle, I think everyone embraces that, which makes it function pretty well. And we're rolling up here about 2/3 of the way through. Just take us on some of your reflections back on the first, let's just say 2/3 of the season, a little bit through preseason, getting there through Gold Cup, which obviously we spoke a little bit about being a tough period for us last year, and kind of coming out on the other end, I would say, taking on some of the demons of last year, getting results in places, for example, in Dallas, where that wasn't a place where we got a result last year. So just take us through some of your reflections upon the first 2/3 of the season going into Leagues Cup.
Yeah, well, we ultimately are in a position where we can look back very satisfied with what the work has amounted to. We I think had someone at the beginning of the season said that we'd be approaching this period with the top of the table in touching distance, to have been incredibly competitive almost at all moments in all games, to have not lost back-to-back games. I think we'd have absolutely snapped someone's hand off for that situation. But I'm obviously very much inclined to look back at the process that has led to this point, and the ingredients that I think as a group of staff and players and guys around the group have brought forth, that's meant that we can be so competitive. And I think a lot of that is to do with the way in which we just really try and push improving every day. I think everyone who's wrapped around the group has that mentality whereby they are trying to really help everybody on the playing staff really improve day to day, to really try and squeeze the most out of one another, really try and squeeze the most out of us as a collective, and try and ultimately arrive at game day in a position where we feel like we can beat everyone and feel like we can cause teams real problems. And I think that did start day one of pre-season. I think we set out this year with a real purpose, a real intent to build upon what was a really good first year. Last year we added a couple of pieces over the course of the off season that have been helpful this year, and but they were coming into what I felt was a really stable, a very healthy culture that was very much geared towards improving every day. And I think when you're a club of sort of our size and our standing in the grand scheme of things, I think that's ultimately the most important thing, that every day feels like it's a day where over the course of that 90 minutes, 2 hours in the morning, the group is really going to improve and get better. And I think this year we've kept a really sort of steady approach to doing that. And even amongst the jam-packed last sort of 6 weeks or so, where it feels like we're playing almost every 3 days, very little training time, I feel like we've managed to hold on to that idea of just improving every day, just improving on the back of every game, making sure we pick it apart in really good detail. And I think we've got to this stage now where we've got a group of players that is really bought in, really invested. We've got something that we can build upon, grab onto and take forward into the coming weeks and months, and then hopefully improve in this transfer window. And I think that was a position that we were desperate to get into by this point, and unfortunately we're
there. At Target, we're ready to cheer with the hometown fans and gear you up for an epic season. Whether watching from the stands or your living room, score big on game day with everything you need for the win. We're here to be your home field advantage at Target and Target.com. Yeah, and speaking of which, you led me right back into my next question, is we've seen a few departures now. Sam went on loan, Devin went on loan, and Sungbin has gone to St. Louis as well. And you talked about potentially improving in this window, and this was a very critical point last year where we brought in the likes of Kelvin and Jeff. Sam had come in at this point, and a few other players. Again, I imagine that's something the club's looking to do, but just take us into the thought process as, we're already in a good spot, pushing for a few different titles and a few different trophies, and now we just want to take that next potential step just to get over that hump and to really put us in contention for that.
Yeah, I think the window always comes, MLS in its current form, at an awkward time, in the sense that by the time you get players in this window, then the opportunity to make real impact is fairly limited. But we do look back upon that window last year, post Leagues Cup, where we were able to add a couple of pieces that were really, really helpful for us. And we have set the course for this season with that level of impact in mind when we approach this window. And obviously the guys behind the scenes, driven by Khaled through the recruitment department into the data department, they do a really good job of making sure that process is really thorough and that no stone is unturned in trying to arrive at bringing in a couple of players that are going to make the same level of impact as those guys did last year. And I think in our position now, what we have is much more stability, much more sense of something real that is allowing us to be really, really competitive with every team across the two divisions. And I think then when you're bringing in players to something that feels very certain, and you can never be completely sure of your level of competitiveness, but I feel like what we have at the moment is a really solid base, and adding a couple of pieces that come into that bracket at the top of the group will be really helpful for us. And I think everyone responded really well to how that felt last year, responded really well to how that felt over the course of this off-season. And I think every time a transfer window has come around, we've been able to improve. The level day-to-day has got better, and I think that's the biggest thing for us. We want day-to-day to feel really high level. We made the point at the beginning of the year that everyone involved with this wants to feel a part of something that it feels high performance. It feels like every day you're getting better. It feels like all that is amounting to competitiveness and chunks of good results and ultimately positioning the table. And I think we're there. So if we get that level of impact from this window, then who knows what our ceiling is.
Yeah, and the players that came in last year had an immediate impact in terms of the success. And we've been fortunate enough to have a lot of success this year. But at the same time, I know how much work goes into it. So as much as you can say we've been lucky to have XYZ, we also put in the work day in, day out, and that's something that we have to own that work and pat ourselves on the back. But when it comes to looking back at some of the success, is it a balance of squad rotation? Because we've seen almost 20 different starters, I think, this season through a variety of different competitions. Is it even bringing in new players, brings the best out of everyone. If you bring in a different player in each position, now everyone's under the gun to try to push themselves to their absolute maximum, which then gives you ultimately a tough decision to make the player or make the decisions for the 11 on the weekend. So what do you attribute a lot of the team's success? Is it just the players buying in, the ideas, the squad, or, maybe a little bit of everything?
Yeah, I think firstly I would like to say that I think we're talking a lot here about success and the group moving in the right direction and everything being very rosy, but as you well know, we're also sitting here with a real sense of frustration that we're not in a stronger position, because as much as of course objectively it's been a really good first 2/3 of the year, and I think everyone ultimately is very happy with where we are. There have been lots of points of frustration where we feel like we have been very close to the finish line in a couple of games, or very close to complete performances, and we haven't quite been able to find that last 10-15% or those like real precision in moments of games that would mean that we'd be sitting here in a far better position and we'd have maybe real authority at the top of the table. So I think when we're having these types of conversations about why we want to improve because we want to take that final step. And I think everything is geared toward that. I think what we've done so far, in answer to your question, has been based upon, last year we used 36 players, which was an insane number of players to use over the course of the year. This year we're down to that sort of number, between maybe 20, 23, something like that, in terms of total usage. But across those players, we've had a really good level of performance. We've had, there's always, I think anyone who watches us play will say there's always a baseline level of competitiveness, a baseline level of difficulty with which the opposition has in beating us, and I think that is just crucial in this league, particularly as we've talked about the level of variation. It's just not possible to always adhere to what your ideal is in terms of how you want the team to look. So much goes into how these games ultimately look come Saturday evening. So I think the fact that in every game we have competitiveness, we have organisation, we have buy-in, we have hard running, we have real energy and aggression from the players, to say that across 20 has been brilliant this year. And I think that ultimately is the base of what we do. But I also feel like over the course of 6 months, the team has really evolved to become more complete, and that hopefully is the start, only the start of where we want this team to get to. I think, of course, opposition coaches and guys that support the team and us inside the group know what makes us such a hard team to play against. We're very difficult to score against. We concede very few goals. We're very good on the counter-attack. We're very, very good on set plays. We have that general level of competitiveness. But we also want to be a team that ultimately can be a threat across all phases, and I think you've really seen huge improvements, particularly in some difficult away situations over the course of certainly the last 6 weeks or so. So I'm really happy with what we have as a base, but as always, I want us to get significantly better and make sure that we feel that day to day.
Yeah, and I think controlling the controllables is something we speak about in terms of how we play our shape, and a lot of those moments are moments and things that we can control, which ultimately give us, I think, a better handle on the game with or without the ball. And I think the success the team has had, also understanding we've lost certain moments. And that's what I think is exciting for the fan base in general, is to see where the club might be at. But ultimately, if we can polish up some of these things, even if we look back at the game against Portland and a few of these other away matches where we're moments away from getting different results, which changes our place in the table, those are things in which we can hopefully try to control and manipulate as much as possible from our end, which then thrusts us even into a more positive light going forward. So, take us into the last final question would just be, obviously we have Leagues Cup coming up, and then the last half of the season. What do you expect going into the final third-ish of the season, whether that's Leagues Cup or in the league? We have an Open Cup semifinal at home in September. Just take us into your thought process moving forward in the last little bit.
Oh, well, we're competing on as many fronts as we could possibly be competing on at the moment, which is a phenomenal position for us to be in. And I want to make sure that the remaining months are played out with that in mind, and the way in which we work every day and the way in which we play come game day really reflects the fact that we could do something that the club hasn't done before. We could do something that a lot of the players haven't done before, which is win a trophy and be one of the more competitive teams across a number of competitions, which is really hard to do here. And ultimately, what's in mind when I say that is that what is good for the group is also good for the individuals involved in that. And I think at the moment we've got a number of players that are playing at a really high level, that have big ambitions, that really want to go and make a mark, even perhaps beyond MLS and further afield. And I want the group to play in a way that reflects that that reflects the fact that we're a team that is grabbing people's attention. Players in our group are grabbing people's attention, and they're doing so because they're showing certain qualities week to week. And I think if we can hold on to that, we can hold on to the work that sits behind the performances and really make sure that we are grinding away one game at a time to hopefully arrive at what is our objective, to win a trophy. We will find ourselves in a good position at the end of the year. I feel like we've got to that nearly point now where we've got a really solid base. We know what we are, which is a really good position to be in, where you're performing every week on the basis of something very solid. Everyone is in absolutely no uncertain terms as to why we are a good team and why it is we are so competitive at the moment. Now it's for us to make sure that we continue in that vein, but we also continue to get better. And I think the fact that we've got a transfer window, we've got Leagues Cup, we've got the Open Cup semi-final, we've got the possibility of a home final, we've got the possibility of home advantage in the playoffs if we can continue with our current form. We've got the possibility of competing for top place in the Western Conference and everything that goes with that. We couldn't almost have positioned ourselves much better. Now it's for us as a group of people, me as a head coach, you guys as the coaches, the players, everyone around that, to take that opportunity, because it's not every year that you find yourselves in this position. And I think we set out this year with some statistics ringing in our ears around the difficulty with which teams qualify for the playoffs back to back, let alone win a trophy. I think by design this league is really difficult to have sustained success in. So we've got to work with that in mind and grasp the opportunity that this first 6 months has given us.
Yeah, and for me, I was fortunate enough to play 14 years, of which pretty much 2 of those were very competitive. I was fortunate enough to go to a final in 18, and in 17, my Timbers team won the West. Besides that, it was pretty much fighting for playoffs. So I understand the value and the opportunity in front of us. And I will say, from myself now, having been on the player side and now having been on the opposite end of it, although the squad has these big goals, we are so very much focused on the process. So I'll steal that from the Sixers, is trust the process. But that day-to-day process is highlighted, which allows you to then get to your goals. But that's pretty much it. Flew by already. But again, thank you so much, Coach Ramsay, for stopping by on this week's episode of Sound of Loons podcast, brought to you by Line of Health. All the best in the next coming games in Leagues Cup, St. Louis on the weekend, and then going into potentially the Open Cup semifinal. Maybe we'll have you back on at the end of the season. We'll see. But thank you so much for your time today. And please keep listening to the next one, and like and subscribe and wave your damn scarves whenever we have a long throw in. I'm trying to get that one going.
Yeah, I'll vouch for him on that.
Cool. All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, man.